Hello, hello. I want to welcome you to the School Transportation Nation podcast. I'm Tony Corpin, publisher and president of School Transportation News.
And I'm Ryan Gray, editor-in-chief of School Transportation News. We have a very special guest on today's episode, Todd Watkins, director of transportation from Montgomery County Public Schools in Maryland, one of the largest school districts in the nation. And Todd is our 2020 Transportation Director of the Year. You won't want to miss that interview.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear you, Ryan, talk to Todd. He's one cool guy, and what he's done over there is just amazing in Montgomery County, so I'm looking forward to that. And this episode is brought to you by TransFinder, the leader in school bus routing software, and we have a special message from our friends at Cummins coming up, as well as our tech tip, brought to you by Zonar, a leader in smart fleet management. For students with special needs, buses are running as usual, even during this pandemic, and everyone on board needs you to go the extra mile to protect them. Enhance your safety strategies with modern fleet technology from Zonar. Ensure sanitization protocols are followed, track ridership to support contact tracing, and locate buses with precision for accurate parent communications. Go to zonarsystems.com/protect. That's zonarsystems.com/protect. Well, Ryan, we tied a bow on TSD Virtual last week, and it was a great time. And we're already kind of looking forward to STN Expo Virtual, January 25th through the 27th. I'm really excited to see what kind of content you cook up for us. I know we're working on keynote speakers and getting everybody dialed in. Really a heavy focus on leadership. But before we go there, why don't you give us a little kind of update? TSD Virtual, the dust is settled. How are you feeling about it? Where are you at? What kind of feedback are we getting from our readers?
Everyone really enjoyed it. I think that obviously we've been talking that folks just really are super anxious to get back to business as usual. That includes getting out to on-site conferences. We just know right now that that's just not in the cards for a lot of folks. So really saw a lot of appreciation from our attendees of being able to all congregate, get on video or at least chat, see vendors, see, of course, our national speakers and experts, and just commune with each other. There was so much chatting going on between attendees and sharing of ideas, asking questions, talking about what's working in their districts, what's not working, providing suggestions in terms of technology or seating charts or securement of students, wearing PPE, all those things. So definitely getting a lot of great feedback. The attendees really enjoyed the platform. The overarching theme, though, what they're telling us is they can't wait to get back to in-person.
Yeah, I'm excited for in-person too, Ryan. And, looking forward at the TSD conference, we were telling people there at TSD Virtual that, when we look forward into 2021, normally the TSD conference in person takes place in March, but this year it really just doesn't look good. So we're going to make that conscious decision to move back the conference to November 17th through the 23rd. Mark your calendar, save the date, TSD in person, fingers crossed for that. But I think November, it's probably pretty likely. But I guess you never say never these days, Ryan. It's kind of crazy. Virtual is something we've been thrust into, and everybody is, I think, becoming more acclimated to it. I feel like when we did our first virtual conference, the Bus Technology Summit back in September, that was pretty much the first virtual conference I think our industry had done. And there definitely was a learning curve. You walk away and you say, hey, what do we learn? How can we get better? How do we improve? And I think the same goes for any school transportation operation, right? COVID's new. We don't know. Everybody's trying to do their best with what hand they've been dealt. Every situation is different at a local level. Big national problem with local solutions. So we're doing our best to educate, inform, arm you guys with the information to better serve your district, company, and your community and the kiddos that it's all about them. I mean, Ryan, you talked a little bit about on the last podcast. If we can can serve the kids and do the best we can possibly do to achieve that, that's ultimately what this is all about, right? Making it safe for the kids, making sure that we are doing our best as operators, because you have to have empathy, right? You can only do what you can do. You can't move mountains. You've got a certain amount of resources. And I think you have to be sure that everyone around you, you have to say, hey, if I'm in that guy's shoes, are they able to do their job effectively, or should I just have empathy for them? It was really interesting, Ryan, in one of the sessions I sat in at TSD Virtual by Fred Dolker at Dean Transportation. Fred did a funny thing where he talked about Mr. Fred's neighborhood doing the whole Mr. Rogers pull. And one of the things that he talked about that was really interesting to me is he talked about safety. And we love to hang our hat that school buses are the safest mode of transportation. And no doubt they are. But he was talking more about student safety from a standpoint of the perception of children feeling safe on the school bus versus the physical act of just being safe. It's, does that child feel safe on that school bus? And particularly special needs students, do they feel safe? Do they feel protected? They're in our care, and we just can't forget that. And that it's just so important to remind ourselves of that safety component of making sure children feel like they're in a safe space, that the school bus is that safe space.
And piggybacking on that, it's really, you hit on it. It's service, the level of service, standard of care, level of care. One of the things that we've been talking a lot about is student transporters need to be providing that or ensuring that level of care, that level of service, regardless if the students are on the school bus or not. Again, we keep saying that, we would all prefer that all children ride the school bus, but we know it's not possible. There was a session at TSD Virtual spearheaded by Charlie Hood, Executive Director of NASDIPS, along with Susan Miller, Transportation Supervisor with Colorado Department of Education, Carlos Chicas, Director of Transportation at Capistrano Unified School District in Southern California, was one of our podcast guests a couple weeks ago, as well as Josh Rice, Director of Transportation at Klein ISD in Texas. Josh, he uses one of these transportation network companies that has really come to the forefront as being an alternative to school bus for certain students. A lot of times students with special needs or students who experience homelessness, where those school buses don't make sense from a logistical or even a financial standpoint. And then Carlos, he's using another alternative transportation company that has been for a while. That's kind of more the fixed route, same driver every day. And so Susan has done a lot of work in Colorado to make sure that the regulations for this alternative transportation meet that standard of care that is expected and really regulated out of school bus, and that school districts, when they are engaged in some of these additional or outside contract services, that they can provide that oversight and ensure that what the companies are saying they're doing, they actually are doing, and that they're meeting that standard of care, those requirements on driver certification and background testing, on the vehicle specifications and vehicle safety, the driver training. So Charlie at NASDIPS, of course, has been monitoring a lot of this as we've been seeing this kind of grow across the country. So we need to keep in mind that we heard this at Bus Technology Summit too, that one of the disruptors that we're seeing in this whole technology connected, autonomous, electric kind of conversation, we can't forget this alternative transportation mode and this kind of the role that this gig economy, if you will, is playing into it. So school bus, student transportation, we really have to evolve. We have to realize that not every place school buses are viable. And this is nothing new, right? This has been something that school districts have been dealing with for a decade or more. But we're just seeing it come to the forefront more and more. And as opportunity lends itself, right, with our capitalistic society, there will be companies that come to being to address a vacuum, to address a need. And that's what we're seeing. But student transportation, we need to be ready. We need to evolve, and we need to know what these new businesses, what these new services mean to the traditional model of student transportation service. And that is changing, and we need to keep up with the times. And that's why training, again, is so important, and having these conversations at events like TSD Virtual.
Yeah, well, Ryan, I think, another use for the alternative student transportation side of things is it was discussed heavily during the conference was driver shortages, big hits people are taking with COVID. We did hear from one of our friends at one school district in Colorado that had mentioned that they were hit with COVID, their driver pool, and it was like one driver, two driver, 12 drivers, and all of a sudden you got to really hunker down on an outbreak like that. And, it creates stress. It really puts into question then, hey, should we be reopening? How do we rein that in? And there was a big story in the Wall Street Journal last week. New York parents should prepare for public school shutdown. And that came from Mayor de Blasio. And that's another thing, rising cases of COVID, Ryan. And as schools restart, then they shut back down and go full remote. So I feel like it's different everywhere, but we're really seeing an uptick in COVID cases, especially, in the larger metropolitan cities. And that's cause for concerns. Like, do we pump the brakes? And, everybody's going back into virtual mode.
And it's not just the large metropolitan cities. I mean, some of the fastest growing areas in terms of infection rates are in the Midwest. So this comes back to the STARTS task force that came out over the summer for the student transportation industry, where it was really not giving recommendations or guidance, but it was providing a matrix of the types of questions, the types of discussions that school districts need to have to reopen. Of course, this was heading into the new school year. But part of that also was not only having a plan to reopen, but what if you do reopen and then you have to close back down again? This was talked a lot about over the summer. And Tim Ammon, who was one of the co-managers for the STARTS task force, he's one of the co-founders of Decision Support Group, a consultancy for the industry. He's talked a lot about this. And in fact, just the other day on his LinkedIn page, he was bringing this forward again amid all this news of so many districts closing back down or going from that all in-person model back to a hybrid or fully remote. So that's something that student transporters, they've had to have at the forefront of their mind this entire time. If they were able to reopen fully or in some kind of hybrid model, they knew or should have known full well that it might come to pass that we need to pump the brakes a little bit and take a few steps back. So that's been a part of this planning, and it just adds to a lot of the anxiety that a lot of districts have been facing. And you're right about the driver shortage. That's not going away. And, amid this, if anything, something that's been perhaps helping a little bit is what really hasn't come to fruition that we might have been expecting was how all the social distancing or physical distancing, I like to call it, would affect routes. We were anticipating, goodness, our districts, they don't have money to buy all these additional buses that'll be needed because we can only get 10 kids on instead of the normal 66 or whatever that magic number was. But a lot of parents have been keeping their kids home because a lot of these districts that have been opening up, they still have to be providing options for virtual learning. Also, too, a lot of parents maybe have decided to find other routes for their kids to get to school, driving them themselves. They don't want to worry about having their kids on the school bus and dealing with all the new policies and procedures or just some of the anxiety of that environment. So that has been a little bit of a surprise, I think, to the industry. So that has been helping, but still we know that the school bus driver shortage, we can't forget the mechanic shortage as well. Those aren't going away. So we'll continue to keep our eye on this and write more about how folks are dealing with this. And certainly here as we get close to 2021, February issue, our garage issue, we'll be looking at that mechanic shortage topic as well. So just a lot still there hanging on the vine for us to try to grasp and try to digest.
Yeah, time is just really flying by so fast, Ryan, and I can't believe TSD Virtual is in the rearview mirror. Looking forward towards STN Expo Virtual and just some amazing presentations. And I think as people go back to this virtual world, we want to prepare you guys for the training that you need. And the best thing to do is to participate in some of these virtual opportunities because the world's changing and you got to adapt to the situation. And you know what? Our friends at TransFinder are doing just that as well. They're going to be a diamond sponsor at the upcoming STN Expo Virtual, and they want to share how Route Finder Plus and Stop Finder work seamlessly together, bringing peace of mind to parents, students, and school personnel. You can learn more on transfinder.com about their browser-based Route Finder Plus. It's the most powerful, innovative software in the industry. And working seamlessly with StopFinder, you and your caregivers can create as many alert zones from school to home as you want, resulting in the most accurate ETA in the industry. With Thanksgiving just around the corner, let's say Route Finder Plus and Stop Finder, they go together like turkey and mashed potatoes. That sounds delicious. Stop Finder and Route Finder Plus, which was voted the most innovative software by industry leaders at the recent Bus Technology Summit. Learn more about the most robust parent app platform in the industry by emailing free Stop Finder at transfinder.com. That's free Stop Finder at transfinder.com, and make sure and put turkey in the subject line. Everybody loves turkey. It sounds really delicious. Great combo. Thanks to our friends at TransFinder. We're really excited to welcome our first guest today on the podcast, Derek Kiesler, Cummins Medium Duty On-Highway Product Manager. Derek, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Tony, thanks for having me today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Absolutely. And Derek and I were talking just before we jumped on here, and he was filling me in. He just had a new baby, super fresh. He's got 4 kids, so he's a parent too, and a couple of school-age kids in 2nd grade and 3rd grade. How's that going for you? You doing some virtual learning? You back in school? What's happening there?
Yeah, Tony, we are struggling for sleep at our house, as you can imagine. Our newborn is 2.5 months old. And as you said, our 2 oldest boys are 2nd and 3rd grade. They went back to school at the beginning of the year. We just learned recently that our school corporation would actually be going to virtual learning for a period of time to allow staff members who were quarantining from contact tracing and all that to kind of get back on their feet. And so we are going through it just like a lot of other parents right now with this COVID pandemic period and school with our kids. And so, yeah, we're all in it together, aren't we, Tony?
Definitely. And what school district are you? Did you say Bartholomew County in Indiana?
Yeah, in Bartholomew County, Indiana. Columbus, Indiana is where Cummins is headquartered, and I live here in Bartholomew County with my wife and kids.
Wonderful. And it was also my understanding your former life there at Cummins, you might have been deeply involved in the product development side and the engineering side of the Cummins B6.7 engine. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right, Tony. I'm coming up on 15 years of time here at Cummins, and my first 13 of that actually was in new product development. And I actually did power cylinder development, so dealt with a lot of the parts that I like to say go up and down and round inside of the engine. Got to develop those. And so it's a really cool transition for me to spend that amount of time developing the product for these customers and then get to come kind of onto the commercial and product management side and see now how customers are using them and how we can make them better and more valuable for them.
Yeah, the Cummins B6.7 engine has been such a dependable powerhouse for the school bus industry for so many years, right? You guys dominate the engine segment of our market. And, maybe you can share a little bit about kind of where you guys are headed from an EPA 2021 standpoint in terms of the best version of the product. How is it getting better?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really passionate and excited about this, so I appreciate that question. We really are excited about the EPA 2021 B67 that we're launching. And, I think to talk about the 21 product, we kind of have to look back to our EPA 17 product. We were able to deliver on average a 5 to 8.5% fuel efficiency increase over the 2013 parent product. So that was a huge step forward. And as we kind of stand on the shoulders of that product and we looked ahead to 21, we were really focused on 3 areas. And those were emission standards for greenhouse gas requirements in 2021. We spent a lot of time focusing on improving our maintenance intervals, and then really further steps to build upon the reliability, that tried and true reliability of the B. And so from a greenhouse gas requirements perspective, this product is really going above and beyond the regulatory requirements. And by above and beyond, I really mean below. We're beating the requirements for that product, which helps us reduce our carbon footprint, but also our customers reducing their carbon footprint. And so we're really excited about that. We've been able to deliver some really outstanding value through improved maintenance intervals to help reduce planned downtime and really in turn improve the uptime, keeping these school buses on the road for longer stretches. And this is big value for school corporations from our perspective. Keeps the quantity of buses that are cycling through the service centers down. In addition, it's reduced costs for parts and for labor to do that maintenance. And lastly, we're always focused on reliability and uptime. And that never changes no matter what products and application we're designing and delivering for. And we really know the safety of our kids. Like we were talking about before, right? My two boys, they go get on the yellow bus every morning and come back home. And the safety of them is so important, and probably now more than ever in this pandemic time. And so we really want to give our customers and the parents, peace of mind that the engine power in their bus it's really one less thing that they got to worry about right now. And so we really are excited to deliver the 2021 B67, and we really are excited to see the best B67 ever for our school bus customers.
Yeah, wonderful. Good info. With your vast knowledge, 15 years experience, are there any nuggets, maintenance, improvement tips, things you might expect coming up with this?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, maintenance improvements was really a focus on our 2021B. And, we're really excited to be able to increase our oil drain intervals. We're bumping those up to 30,000 miles, 1,000 hours, or 18 months, whichever comes first. And if you're familiar with our previous product, that's an increase on all three of those. In addition, on the fuel filter intervals, we've actually been able to increase those by a factor of 4 times. So today's product is a 15,000 mile filter change interval. That's now bumped up to 60,000 miles, 2,000 hours, and 18 months.
That's a lot. That's a really great increase. That's impressive.
Yeah, it really is exciting. And the last one I'm probably most excited about is our current product has a coalescing filter in its crankcase ventilation system. And that's something that requires maintenance. And so one thing we've been able to do with our 21 product is completely remove that coalescing filter. And so now the system, the crankcase ventilation system, is completely maintenance free for the life of the product. In the end, if you do have a planned service event upcoming for your product, our 2021 product, it's got over 3,500 authorized service locations. So any customer is never far from help if they need it.
Wonderful, Derek. Great information. Super excited to see the new Cummins B6.7 engine 2021 coming to you soon. Yeah, if you want to learn more, you can go to www.cummins.com/engines/school-bus to learn more about Cummins and what they're offering new here to the school bus market. Super excited to have you, Derek. Thanks for jumping on.
Tony, thanks for having us. Take care.
Wonderful. You don't want to miss what's up next. Ryan Gray talks with Transportation Director of the Year, Todd Watkins.
Now want to bring to the School Transportation Nation stage Todd Watkins, our reigning School Transportation News Director of the Year for 2020. Todd, how are you doing today? Thanks for joining us.
I'm doing great. I'm glad to be here.
The Transportation Director for Montgomery County Public Schools in Maryland. Boy, you guys run one of the larger operations in the nation. Tell us a little bit about it. I believe almost 1,400 total school buses in the fleet. That's got to rank you very high up there in both Maryland as well as the nation.
We're the largest school system and transportation department in Maryland. I think we're number 6 of the publicly owned fleets around the country. I think we teeter back and forth between number 6 and number 7. And we do have a large school system. We have 205 schools. We have about 165,000 students, and we have a lot of fun doing it.
I bet. I know you for several years now, and reading your article in November, learned so much more about you, and we'll get to that in a second. A lot of the people that we talk to on this podcast, we're talking to them about getting back to school. You have the, luck of not having to transport a lot of students right now. You are in lockdown mode. A lot of the districts we're talking about them getting back to school and their buses running and keeping distance on the buses. But Montgomery County, it's essentially doing virtual classes until February. Tell us about that.
Yep, we're all virtual. We had planned to start back at the normal time in the school year, back in the end of August, with an AB kind of hybrid schedule where students went Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday, Friday. And then there was kind of a last minute change from our health folks in our county that said we're going to go all virtual. And we've been doing that ever since. Our plan now is to bring back some special populations in January with some discrete special ed programs, some CTE students, some students who aren't performing as well in the virtual environment as others, and then come back with an option for everybody to have some in-person experience starting in February on an AB hybrid schedule. But as it has been all along, all that is contingent on what the health metrics say. So we're waiting to see what happens. And you say kind of, I'm the lucky one there. I'd much rather be running our full fleet every day and bringing our students in. That would be my preference.
Definitely. And when I say luck, I guess my intent was, maybe at least you can see how other folks are dealing with things so you can perhaps plan better. Speaking of that planning, what are you doing right now? What is your staff doing? How are they maintaining order in the transportation department with so many of the buses just parked? I know that you mentioned that some of the specialized groups of students will be going back in the next month or so. You do have a very small number of special needs students that are being transported. But what are you doing with all your drivers and all your staff right now?
So ever since this began, we've been doing everything we can to find opportunities for us to be helpful in things that are directly related to the pandemic. For instance, recently we just helped with a big campaign with our facilities maintenance folks of replacing air filters throughout the school system to improve ventilation in the schools for when we go back. That's typically not a transportation department function, but we recently had dozens of our staff replacing air filters around the system. We have been doing lots of work with food security for people. We've been delivering lots of produce boxes, the USDA produce boxes that had been provided up until September. In September, they added meat and milk to the boxes. And so our lack of refrigerated buses took us out of that game. But we've been doing non-perishable foods. We have a very diverse employee population in our department. We've been providing language support to lots of programs throughout the system, including virtual classes where we'll provide a Spanish-speaking employee to help with interpretation. So we've been doing a lot of that kind of stuff. We've been just taking on really everything that we can find to do for a bunch of reasons. One is we want to be helpful, right? And people have gotten tremendous personal satisfaction in helping in many of these ways. And so I like to see that employees are getting that kind of satisfaction. The other thing I'm doing, in all honesty, is we've been fortunate enough that our system continues to pay all of our employees, which is really important because in our labor market, if we had a bunch of drivers that went and found other jobs, I don't know what we would do when we opened back up. So I'm very happy that we're continuing to pay people, not only for our readiness, but also because of them supporting their families. But one of the things that I'm doing in terms of taking on all this work is working to kind of lay off proof our staff, right? I know if this thing continues on and we go virtual, on and on and on, I know at some point, right, the question of do we have to lay people off is going to come up. And I want to do everything I can to lay off proof our staff during this virtual instruction time.
Showing a lot of leadership there. Kudos to you for that, taking care of your people. And part of taking care of your people is communication. And that's something that Taylor Hannon, our associate editor, highlights a lot in her profile of you this month in the magazine. And communication has really taken on a new form, hasn't it? Obviously, before we weren't in this world of virtual conferences and Zoom meetings and whatnot. And with your drivers and some of your staff still away from the office, that obviously is probably become one of your bread and butter modes of communication, has it not?
It has. In fact, communication is one of our biggest challenges in the most normal of circumstances, right? I often tell people throughout the school system and others, say, look, imagine managing a business of any size, let's say 100 people, right? And where they all work in the same building every day. There's already communication challenges there. I said, now imagine your 100 people being in their own vehicles spread out all over creation and trying to communicate messages there and have consistent kind of communication with folks and get everybody on the same page. So it's a challenge during the best of times, and it's even more of a challenge now. In fact, all these technologies that you mentioned in that question are new to many of our folks. In fact, our department is one of the ones that when the school system does something electronically, we were often the ones that said, hey, can we have paper copies of that, right, to make sure everybody gets it. But through this, we've actually been kind of forced to get into a better situation there electronically. We've now made sure all of our folks are working two ways, in communication on their emails. We've gotten people doing virtual in-service training. And so we're gaining electronic know-how, right, through this process that we were forced to do. And that's going to be one of the things that really benefits us coming out of this, is that we now have new, reliable means of almost instant communication.
And speaking of which, this was the subject of a session that you participated in last week at the TSD Virtual, where you were talking about not only communication and utilizing technology for that, but also learning, training of your staff. I know a lot of, especially when it comes to student transporters of those special needs routes, training is important across this entire industry, but no more so than for special needs, right?
Absolutely. And so as we've moved on to the virtual platform, this actually had some advantages for us, right? So when we do in-person training, we have between drivers and attendants and supervisors, we have about 1,700 folks in our department. So to do in-person training in those, of course, requires, multiple sites. And so when we want to bring in an expert speaker, we often have to have them be the first part of this meeting and the second part of the next meeting and the third part of the next meeting, and have them scrambling between sites as they work to reach our whole audience. Well, when we move to a virtual platform, the norm is that they're talking to everybody all at once. We, of course, accomplish that sometimes in in-person training with videos, right? So we would use a trainer that we had videotaped in advance, but it seems almost like you're cheating an in-person audience when you use video, right, instead of a live speaker. But it doesn't seem that way at all in the virtual electronic training model. That's just expected. Everybody's on a screen. And so we're able to reach everybody with higher level speakers. So that's been an advantage for us. And we've gotten lots of great feedback, a surprising amount of great feedback about people really liking this platform. I mean, they like that they can kind of tailor it around what works best for their day. When we do the in-person, we have to have everybody there at one time. They like the flexibility to, if they have a short attention span, to watch 15 minutes now and maybe do the next interactive piece for 15 or 30 minutes or whatever, and tailor it around what their learning style is.
And knowledge retention is always, regardless if you're doing training in person or virtually, that's always going to be an issue, right? So what have you seen in terms of being able to make sure that whether taking in some of that training in 15-minute increments or not, or in a full hour, is really sinking in? Because obviously in person, you can be right in front of that person. You can gauge body language a little bit better. Obviously, too, the rubber meets the road, right? Your drivers need to go out and be able to literally deliver for those kids every day. Have there been changes or new things that you've and your staff have had to deal with in terms of that knowledge retention piece in a virtual landscape?
Sure. So we of course are doing checking for understanding as we present in the virtual environment, where people are answering quizzes at the end and that kind of thing. But you're right, you don't get to see the expression on their face to see if they're getting it. The proof will really be in the pudding. When we get back to bringing students in, we'll get to see how well that works. So some, I'm speculating now, some I'll get to see when it really happens. But we'll actually get a really good test of how well it worked, because so much of the material was new. Like all the stuff about COVID, right, was new material. Much of the other in-service is stuff they might have heard before in other in-service meetings and maybe other formats. But all the stuff about the new cleaning protocols and how to stay safe and how do you load your bus and all that kind of stuff related to COVID is all brand new. So we'll really get a true test of whether this new virtual methodology worked.
And finally, I want to bring it back to transporting students with special needs. This is really near and dear to your heart, right? In the article that Taylor wrote on you that's in November, talked a lot about the empathy that you have for your employees, for your associates, for the parents and the students. And that really, it's a personal story that you have. And I did not know this about you, but tell us about your son, Noah, and the lessons that he's taught you and your family and your professional life.
Sure. So Noah is our oldest child. He's obviously a son, and he is 23 years old now. And he was diagnosed fairly early in his first couple of years of of life with a genetic disorder. Right? At the time, we didn't know exactly what that was. We've only learned over the past several years as genetic testing has become much better that we've learned exactly what it is. It's a syndrome called SATB2 associated syndrome, and it's the SATB2 gene that's impacted in his case. And it plays out a lot like autism in many ways in terms of behaviors and things like that. It also had some other medical implications with it. For instance, he was on a feeding tube until he was about 18 years old or so. He's nonverbal, except for he says one word. When you say, "Who loves you?" he says, "Mama," which brings great delight to my wife.
I'm sure.
And to all of us, really. But other than that, he's completely nonverbal. And sometimes when I reference the autism-like characteristics, sometimes when Noah doesn't get things the way Noah wants, right? We all struggle with this, right? When we don't get what we want, we react in various ways. Noah sometimes reacts a little more expressively than many people might. We say it that way. And so I've learned when we have buses with students that have behavior challenges, or when we have situations where with toileting issues. Now, Noah took him a long time to learn to be relatively independent in toileting. So when we have challenges like that on buses, or when staff struggle to interact with a nonverbal student, or you find a bus team that just assumes because a student can't speak, I don't think they rationally think this, but it's almost like they think they can't hear either, right? And so you see bus teams that maybe won't interact with students, or just get frustrated by things not going the bus team's way, right? Kind of like I described about Noah. And we get a variety of different bus teams that when things don't go their way, right, they respond differently. And I'm able to bring my own experience in to say to folks, well, have you considered this, or have you thought about that, or here's what happens in our family when this happens, or whatever. And I find that it helps me to, for one, relate better to their situation, right? To take those students and or parents' perspective on this, and to just say, look, this is different than what you might experience in your family. When the bus shows up late or doesn't show up, or when the student is late and the bus leaves, or I'm able to say, here's what that sometimes means for a family with a student with autism, right? For some families, that means you got to jump in the car and go instead. For a family with a student with significant autism, it might be that it creates this total meltdown and destroys the day for the entire family. Right. And so it just has helped me along the way to have those kind of professional empathy, as you say. And in a personal way, I'm quoted in the article saying Noah has made me and my family better people. I mean, we reflect on this all the time, how much better people we are than if we hadn't had Noah in our lives. And he's taught us patience. He's taught us to, when we see somebody with an obvious difference, a disability or whatever in a crowded place, you often see that people won't even approach a person because they just don't know what to do or don't know what to say. I don't think people in general are trying to be mean. They're just uncomfortable. Well, Noah has helped us to be comfortable. And so in a room of folks where somebody's a little bit different over in the corner or whatever, I see my other kids will just walk right up and start engaging. And it just has helped us all around to be better people, and for me to certainly be a better employee and leader in this field.
What a gift, and especially heading into Thanksgiving next week. A lot for you and your family to truly be grateful for. So
absolutely.
Well, thanks so much, Todd. If you haven't read the article, please do head over to stnonline.com. You can access it there on our homepage, or go over into our magazine section and enter that way. And of course, you should all have the issue at home or at your office or soon. So invite you to check out more on Todd. Todd, again, thanks so much. Thanks for your hard work last week at TSD Virtual. Super appreciative of that. I hope to work with you even more in the future. Have a great Thanksgiving next week.
Thank you very much, Ryan. I enjoyed being here. And thank you very much for the honor of naming me Transportation Director of the Year. I was both honored and shocked when I got that call.
Our pleasure. We just award the people out there like yourselves that are doing a great job each and every day. So that's a great accomplishment for you. So we're glad that we could shine some light on that.
Thank you very much.
Hey, congratulations again to Todd Watkins on being the Transportation Director of the Year. We appreciate you, and also our friends at Cummins. Derek Kiesler, thanks for jumping on the podcast. Special thanks to our sponsors, TransFinder, Zonar, and Cummins for participating in this episode number 39. Visit stnonline.com for your news and analysis on all aspects of school transportation. We love our listeners and we want you all to have a very happy Thanksgiving with your families. There won't be a new episode next week due to the holiday, but feel free and take a look at our archives on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, don't forget to check out stnpodcast.com. We'll be back with a new episode soon featuring the one and only Temple Grandin. Looking forward to hearing from her. We'll see you next time, School Transportation Nation. Be safe and happy holidays.